Trav.
What's up, Gary?
One of them days, man. It's fun, but I mean, it's just been, you know how it starts out hectic and then it just kind of stays that way, you know? That's been this show today.
There you go. That's what you want, right? You want some synergy.
Well,
you want some synergy on that show.
We've been jumping around and making it happen. And of course, you make it happen every day on Southern Fried Sports, BamaOnline.com. I love reading some of your analysis and takeaways on BOL. And we have enough now to have some takeaways. We've had 3 practices. We'll have another one this afternoon. Yesterday in Shells. You know, you're out there making notes and videoing and just your impressions of what you've seen so far from this 2019 Alabama football team.
Well, pretty typical of a Nick Saban team the last 11 or 12 years in that there's plenty of frontline talent to get right back to where Alabama fans are accustomed to seeing their team. That's the college football playoff. That's certainly in position in late November, which may be the most amazing thing of this run under Nick Saban is that each and every year, for really the last 11 out of the last 12 years, I'd say, Alabama going into that final regular season weekend's been right there in the mix for a national championship. So that stands out to you that that's still the case. We're not seeing a drop-off in talent, I don't think, anytime soon. But you do look around, and there are maybe some more question marks than you're used to seeing that don't involve the quarterback position for a change. Defensively, I think there's some really good competitions going on. I think some of them, if you're an Alabama fan, you feel good about regardless of how they play out. And there's 1 or 2 others where you're kind of wondering exactly how this is going to work. I think safety is a position where, regardless of how that plays out opposite Xavier McKinney, Alabama's going to be really good. If it's Shaheem Carter, if it's Jared Maiden. But at weak side linebacker, I think there's going to be questions until you see Josh McMillan actually produce as a fifth-year senior. Or maybe it's one of the younger guys that ultimately makes a move at that spot. And I'd say depth across the board, maybe a little bit more of a question in terms of not talent, but exactly who is going to emerge. The defensive line, I think, is one of those spots. Tight end is one of those spots.
When you heard Nick Saban say Saturday, and of course we know Cochran does an incredible job of strength and conditioning, and I think Cochran was a young guy when he got here. I think he's gotten better at his job, as you would expect after going into his 13th season. But when Saban said this was the best conditioned football team he's seen at Alabama heading out of the summer into fall camp, did that catch you off guard a little bit? He usually doesn't say things like that.
No, he usually likes to see him go out and actually do it for a little bit. But, I think he probably encouraged in terms of how his team has responded during the offseason to that rough finish in Santa Clara. I think that's more so a question he had for the mindset of this next team, more so than physically would they be in a position where they could compete, because you expect that to be the case. It means more from a standpoint of the veterans, the leadership on this team has also done a good job in getting the younger guys to buy in and sort of having that complete performance through the off season. And it's important too, because we know once you get to mid-October, late October, you can be a talented football team, but if you're not a well-conditioned and healthy football team, in connection to that a lot of times, Novembers can be really, really rough. And so, that's where Alabama has year in and year out for the last decade plus sort of separated itself from 90% of the competition out there, in my opinion. And looks like it'll have a chance to do that again this time around.
Travis Reier with us here from Southern Fried Sports, BamaOnline.com, on the Gary Harris Show, visiting for a few minutes. When you look at this schedule, Travis, realistically, and I'm talking about if Alabama just shows up and puts on the pads, they're going to beat some of these teams. How many teams on the schedule, in the 12-game regular season schedule, even have a chance do you think, to beat Alabama?
I think that with the exception of LSU, no one on the home schedule does, really. I mean, we're not to that point yet with Jeremy Pruitt in Tennessee. Ole Miss isn't that team anymore. So I have to look at the road games. I have to look at Columbia in September, College Station in October, and then Starkville and Auburn in November. And I still go back to LSU being the most talented top-to-bottom team on that schedule. The game's going to be here in Tuscaloosa, as we know. I think LSU is trying to transition to an approach on offense that gives itself the best chance to win a game for the first time since 2011 against Alabama. I still don't know if it's quite there yet. I think offensively the expectation for LSU is certainly going to be a large step forward with emerging wide receivers growing up to go along with Joe Burrow. Can John Emery come in at the running back position and give them some juice there? Because, Burrow's a solid quarterback, and those receivers, I think, are going to be really good. But you're going to have to muster some semblance of a run game against Alabama, something that LSU has struggled with more than we talk about the passing game for LSU so much. When's the last time LSU ran the football against Alabama? And if you can't do that, the pass rush is going to do what it's going to do, like it did in Baton Rouge last November. Mm-hmm. So I would still say LSU because it's got to happen again at some point. LSU's too talented, but I still lean more towards Auburn because of what we've seen down there. 2 out of the last 3 trips that Alabama's made down there. I think the point of time on the schedule works in Auburn's favor. They can work a lot of things out, get that quarterback situation where they would like it to be. And talent-wise, they're good enough. Auburn's good enough. And, again, just that game at that point on the schedule, I think that works in Auburn's favor there.
Travis Reier with us. You know how the news cycle works now. It's nonstop, and everybody's looking. I say everybody. Every reporter is looking for something and trying to get something that gets attention and readers and listeners and viewers and all those things. And then the news cycle never ends, but then stories come and they quickly dissipate and we move on to another one. But the Zach Smith story, I haven't talked about it on my show, Travis. I'm interested in your response and your take. It's now a story, I guess, when you interview somebody and don't hire them. You don't even have to hire anybody to get criticized now. Alabama didn't hire Zach Smith. Nick Saban made it clear that the guy was impressive in the interview, but they did the background check and they didn't hire him. Yet that made a lot of headlines. I don't, you know me. I don't understand how you not hire someone and it's a story, but in this day and age, it is. What was your take on that?
Yeah, it's gonna make headlines if it involves Alabama at this point in any facet. I do think Nick Saban is different than a lot of coaches out there now because typically in the hiring process, if an assistant is summoned from a Power 5 blue blood to interview, more often than not these days, that means a job offer's likely coming. Mm-hmm. It's a formality usually at that point. And I don't think Nick Saban operates that way. I think Nick Saban is still sort of old school in that if you're asked to interview and you agree to interview, that's basically what it is. I think in this most recent cycle, you had a coordinator level type assistant coach at a very much blue blood program that interviewed with Nick Saban. And at the end of the interview, it was pretty much left, well, we appreciate you taking the time. You did a great job, and we'll get back to you as we move along in the process. And from my understanding, that assistant was totally missed that it wrapped up that way. Kind of came to Tuscaloosa anticipating entirely a job offer, and it didn't happen. So I think it's just it's a little bit different with Nick in terms of the process. I'm not saying he doesn't go through an interview with a potential candidate and walks away so impressed or is so impressed that at that time he doesn't go ahead and make an offer. There may be situations like that, but from what I've gathered, a lot of times it's exactly what it is. It's an interview. And, and something else I've learned is that Nick Saban just doesn't, talk to the applicant or the interviewee a lot. He talks to people that know that individual a lot. Holman Wiggins, the new assistant coach,
right.
New wide receivers coach, from what I understand. There were calls made as far back to Wiggins' time at Memphis, to sort of background check him and get thoughts on what type of coach he is. So, yeah, I think in this particular case, it's actually genuine that, that's how the process works for Nick Saban.
One other thing I took note of in his press conference, in addition to saying this was the best conditioned team he'd seen coming out of summer, he also went out of his way to praise this coaching staff. He's made it clear he was not pleased with how things ended last year, not just in terms of the result on the field, but in how this coaching staff handled its business, down the stretch. I thought that this was first of all, I think he is happy with his coaching staff. I do think they're very good. I think everything that he said was true, but I think he also wanted to make it clear to the fan base and to the people following Alabama football that kind of stuff will not be an issue. In fact, I think he's done that several times to make it clear that I'm really comfortable with this staff and how they're going to go about their business in 2019.
Yeah, there doesn't seem to be as much sort of uncertainty about how it's going to work. Sort of the chain of command, especially on defense, with Tosh Lapoy a year ago absent in terms of coordinator experience. We kind of know now in retrospect how that played out. Pete Golding, by all accounts, essentially has the better part of a year or a season anyway of kind of running the show on defense under his belt. So it's not entirely new to him from that vantage point going into the season. It does. It sounds like it's very much a together group. And, the grind of a long season reveals everything, though, and it gets difficult because, it's you can call it an Alabama problem, I guess. But when you're playing for the national championship almost every year, it seems like, and you're going into mid-January this coming season potentially, and there are jobs open across college football, and your assistants are, being contacted in some form or fashion, or their representation is, it's a challenge. To keep guys on the same page and, keep the sort of focus, the main thing. And, so we'll see how it plays out in the long run. But I think Saban, from what I understand, made it abundantly clear to this staff that, last January or last December, there wasn't going to be a repeat of that if it comes down to it again.
Enjoyed it as always, Travis, and more Travis Reier coming up at the top of the hour with Southern Fried Sports. What's on your menu today?
We'll check in with Cecil Hurd at Tuscaloosa News and Tidesports.com. We'll talk some fall camp and go around the SEC maybe a little bit as well. Thanks, Gary.